Good evening, everybody. Hey, this is Kevin White, Brownie Fox Publishing, coming to you live. We're going to do an old time radio show, and my guests tonight are Scott and James. But first, let me tell you if you like this program, subscribe to our YouTube channel, put my subscribe button right there, and give us some feedback. It'll be interactive tonight, so you can always ask questions. We're going to have things coming up later tonight. So here we go. Let's start the show. I'd like to welcome Scott and James to the stream. This is like a bunch of old guys talking about old time radio. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, Kevin. Good to be here.
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Like to mention, James Bostic is the host of Conservative Perspective, plays on Mojo. He's out of the great state of West Virginia. What else comes from West Virginia? Let's see, Chuck Yeager. Yes, one of our heroes. Definitely. Yeah. And Scott Corrigan, retired Air Force mechanic, A7s, KC-135s, great guy, master gardener, to say the least, among other things. And so let's get started. So tonight's topic is going to be old time radio, and I'm a huge fan. And James, I found out James was a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And I put that post up on Facebook, so it'd be a lure to find more people to add to the program. So you bit on that, Scott. So appreciate you joining us, and I know you guys. This is a passion. So James, do you have you got things to show or anything you want to?
Well, what we were talking about before the show, this is kind of like my favorite stories, my favorite radio story. And when I was a kid, my dad gave me, and it was a hand-me-down in those days. So this was 1965, 1966. I was a wee little nipper. It was a little Channel Master transistor, AM, FM transistor pocket radio. You know, that's back in days when he had much bigger pockets.
Right.
It looked like a walkie-talkie. But I had that radio. And at night, I would take that radio and I would throw it up underneath my my pillow, and I would just slowly work that channel selector from one end of the dial to the other. And I would listen to whatever was on there. And, you know, at nighttime you get the surge, and then you get a fade, and then stations would fade out, and I would move on through that dial to somewhere else and listen to something. And radio has been a companion for me almost from the very beginning. It was just one of those things. It was a medium that I gravitated to. But one day, in terms of old-time radio, my dad came home, and I showed you these at the beginning of the before the show started. These were produced by the Longines Symphonette Society. Here's one of them. As you can see, the golden age of radio. Mm-hmm. And
nice.
Mm-hmm. You can see there that it is narrated by Jack Benny.
Jack Benny, yeah.
Okay. Now, what this was clips, and it was a trip down memory lane for those people that really did remember, that were part of that era. And it was just clips of various programs and various historical events that took place. You had this album here, which was the golden days of radio, the golden age of radio. Then there was another one, which was more news oriented, the years to remember. And it was a collection of famous radio news broadcasts from the 30s and the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, that's not all. You got these two albums to really sweeten the pot, and this was the one that put the hook in me.
Yeah.
Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Mercury Radio Theater on the Air, the H.G. Wells story, War of the Worlds. And I remember we listened to this. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and we listened to this. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. It was just as believable to a 9-year-old kid sitting in his living room in broad daylight as it would have been to anybody on October 30th of 1938. It was really scary, and it was very believable at that time because imagination had suspended reality and suspended belief. We had news stories. We got news stories all the time. That's part of real life. And there it was as part of this story. And I regaled to it. I was hypnotized. The hook was put in me forever in terms of old time radio after listening to that. I was never the same.
It's pretty awesome. I hear that program every once in a while, and it still fascinates me. That grabs you, and you're like, wow. Then you learn more things as the more you hear it, what's going on in the background.
Right.
It's pretty fascinating. So, Scott, tell me about your old time radio experience.
Well, I don't want to disappoint you, but it's seriously lacking. I mean, I've always enjoyed the little snips I've heard here and there, but I've never really spent a lot of time listening to, following programs and things like that. I was always fascinated with old time radio because you would have to, in order to appreciate it, you'd have to have an imagination, and people did. They used to have an imagination, and and like my mom used to tell me stories about her father and her grandfathers. When it was time for the baseball game to come on the radio, nobody said a word. Nobody made a sound in the house. So radio was a completely different medium, and as a young kid, I had a little transistor radio that I used to tape to the handlebars of my bicycle and take everywhere I went, and we're talking in the late 60s, or very early 70s. So, radio was a wonderful thing, but
up a little bit. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It's you use your own imagination. That's the difference between that and television.
Yeah.
Your brain, every time I listen to something, even multiple times, the scene might change, scenery or the people. I don't know what the people look like, but I don't care. It's not anything that makes the show. It's the actual acting and the imagination. And that's what we don't have that much anymore with what we have today, TV and everything.
Well, you get to paint your own pictures, don't you?
Yes, you do.
And I was talking about this just the other day. You get to paint your picture, Scott, of what you hear. Kevin, so do you, so do I. But at the same time, it's the same story.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going the same place. We're all being taken on the same ride. But Kevin, you have your things that you're seeing as the narrator, as the story's unfolding. Scott, you do too. So do I. So the thing is, you get to paint your own pictures. And
right, just like X minus
the
one.
pictures are already painted today. I mean, with TV and movies, the pictures are already there. All the work's taken out. You just get to sit and absorb. And this is a much more interactive medium in terms of the cerebral part of it, I think.
And I encourage people who don't usually watch OTR, old time radio, go ahead and listen to it. It's very amazing. There's a lot of imagination. All the genres are so original, and sometimes they repeat things, but the storylines are pretty deep. And I think a theme of a lot of things was death back in the 50s and 40s. I noticed that, and a lot of them are about invasions and things like that. And the imagination was pretty wild back then. I never thought it would be like that, but I do encourage people to take a listen. I have Carolyn. My wife, listens with me sometimes, and some things are really funny, and you'll find out a lot of things from that era are what they do now. Like The Life of Riley was actually, let's see, what's that show? Polk High School. What's the name of that? I can't remember. Some of the shows are translated into today. Married with Children is The Life of Riley. Listen to it. It's the same. The wife has the same name, and it's the same exact, formula. Just like all the detective shows are, that translated into Magnum PI and the Rockford Files, and they kept that that link together, and they're the hard-nosed, hard-boiled people. And that's what James and I don't know about James, but I really love the detective shows because the detective is smarter than the police department usually. And they get out and get stuff done.
It's a lot more exciting in the radio, isn't it? Yeah, private detectives in the radio got the life, man. They get beat up a lot, but they got the life.
They get beat
I
up.
always like, and
Yes.
when you and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it just caught me. In terms of that, I think maybe in one of my favorites was the radio version of Dragnet.
Yes.
And there was a companion show. There was another show called The Lineup.
Yes.
With,
yes.
I can't remember the guy. He was Detective Ben Guthrie. I think he was played by Bill Johnstone, who was also a voice of the Shadow.
Yeah. Yes.
But those two were straight up procedural cop shows. And the procedural cop shows that we have to this very day stem from shows like Dragnet when it was on the radio, The Lineup, True Tales of the Texas Rangers with Joel McRae, which was another procedural type cop show. But as far as the detectives go, if you were looking for something happening all the time, you needed to be with George Valentine, or you needed to be with Johnny Dollar, or Richard Rogue, or Richard Diamond. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones there. Spade and Marlowe.
Spade, yeah. Philip Marlowe, yeah, I like him. And back then, different people played that part. Over the years, I know the very last season for Johnny Dollar, actually, they moved to New York City, and
yes, they did.
The star of the show did not want to go there with them. He stayed in Los Angeles. So, yeah, Bill. But yeah, there's so many dimensions to what we're talking about. So I want to know what your favorite shows were. We'll talk about that real quick. Your favorite? I guess you don't. You can go first, James. I don't know if you even have one.
Yes, actually, I do. I have a couple of different ones. In terms of comedy, well, we talked about the cop shows. We talked about Dragnet, which is, I am a Jack Webb fan all the way.
Yes, right.
I mean, even like the later television stuff, Adam 12, Emergency, the later reincarnation of Dragnet in the late 60s, early 70s. But for comedies, I think Jack Benny, Bob Hope were both really good. Fibber McGee and Molly, Jim and Mary and Jordan had a unbelievably talented cast. And trying to think, it's there are just so many. There were so many gifted people in so many different genres in radio. And what we're doing is basically talking about the giants when we talk about guys like Jack Benny and Bob Hope. Inner Sanctum mysteries were always good. And of course, The Shadow. I was a big fan of The Shadow.
Oh, yeah.
Orson Welles. Interesting story. When Orson Welles was doing The Shadow for Mutual, and he was also doing, at that time, the Mercury Radio Theater Playhouse. And both of these, they were both headquartered out of New York. Well, it was impossible for him to get from one studio to the other without, getting speeding tickets. So what he would do is he would call an ambulance because the ambulances wouldn't get pulled over with their sirens and bells, and he would have the ambulance take him from CBS, from Columbia, to Mutual, where he would read The Shadow and not even know the end of the program.
Wow.
Most of the time, he said, well, according to Wells, he said that a lot of times he would get to the studio in time to start and wouldn't know how the program was going to end. Now, you couldn't tell that from him reading the script, mind you, but that's what he said.
That's pretty awesome. He had the star power to do that. So, yeah, so there we go back to the War of the Worlds. So
and he was 23.
Wow.
I think when 23, 24 years old, when he did War of the Worlds.
Awesome.
Wow.
So here we're going to do a trivia question real quick. And I know James, you're going to get it because you're naming all these actors and these parts and everything. You're like light years ahead of me. Well, some of these are no. What was Sergeant Friday's badge number? Do you remember?
714.
You got it.
Oh, man.
All right, jump in here, Scott.
Okay, only
One?
one can answer
One
it,
for you?
Scott.
I hope you're not
Okay.
I
expecting.
have to answer the next one.
All right. All right. Got the other list.
Yeah, there's lots of them.
And of course, you know what city he worked in, Scott, right? This is an easy one, right? Remember the TV show?
Here, number 2.
Yeah.
This is the city.
Yeah. San Francisco.
Close.
Close. Give me my house.
So, okay. Lamont Cranston's alter ego was the Shadow, sort of detective superhero who had powers to cloud men's minds. What was the name of Cranston's leading lady? That's too easy for you. Okay.
For who?
For Scott.
Yeah, no.
Okay. James already knows it. Right?
Okay, that would be Margot Lane.
And who played Margot Lane?
Well, there were a number of actresses, but the most significant
true.
one would have been Agnes Morehead.
Yes, and Agnes Morehead is buried in the town we live in, not that far away, in Dayton, Ohio.
And she was a longtime associate of Wells,
Yes. Yeah.
Indeed.
a gifted actress.
See, that's why I came on tonight, was so I could learn something.
So learn.
I've learned
So
a
I
lot.
think-
Oh my god!
You know, the other thing I like the science fiction X-1. I can listen to those all day. I think I've listened to every single one of them. Every once in a while, I have one that shows up that I've never heard before, but those are rare. And we're going to go into the other one that came before that. Do you remember the name of that, James?
Dimension X.
That's right. Dimension X. Those were mind-blowing shows. I bet back then it was even more mind-blowing because of what they were saying. So imagination, Mars attacks, Mars invades, all the invasion shows and everything. And I'm sure people were scared, or kids were scared, or whatever, what they thought. But my mind is different every time I listen to that stuff. I have different scenery and everything. That's what it's like. Wow, this is really cool. And the technology, and they had sound effects back in the 50s or 40s. I didn't know they had. They could do a lot of stuff in the studio that I didn't think was possible. Like X-1, that the wind up of the music, and you can hear voices at the end. That's genius. And the orchestras they had for these programs, I can't even imagine. Just like on that program you had about the veterans last week, every ship had its own orchestra. And
Its own band. That's right. Yeah. For Pearl Harbor.
Just like these shows, they put so much time and meticulous effort into each show, and just like the cartoons, they had their own orchestras as well. So there's a lot of quality in these programs.
There was, I agree. And when you think about a radio program like Jack Benny or Bob Hope or any of the programs that had a live audience, those studios were enormous because the audience would probably be 300-500 people, and that's a pretty big venue. And then you're going to have a stage that's got an orchestra or an orchestra pit, a place for the performers to read, a workstation for your sound effects guy. So what we hear are just the actors, reading copy. They're reading their script. But when you went, you were in a theater. It was like a movie theater type environment, and you had all these other things, all this other activity gearing and meshing together in order to turn out this one single, clean, unique, one of a kind. And in those days, you were never going to hear it again.
Right, exactly.
Performance.
Unless they put it on wax, you're never going to hear it again.
Or pressed to glass, right.
And if you think about it, I mean, the actors and the actresses, they were really good. I mean, they really had their craft down because sometimes they make mistakes and they just keep going. And you'll see they'll flub something a little bit, but they were doing it in front of a live audience, which you don't really see anymore.
Right.
Even on television, they used to, back Norman Lear had that with his programs, live audiences, but they don't do that anymore, rarely. And it's like a big deal when they do a live show now. Oh, it's going to be live. It's like everything was live before that years ago.
You did, yeah. If you were going to see it, you saw it live. Exactly.
So one of my favorite comedies I'll bring up is The Great Gildersleeve,
Yes.
because
Who
it
was
brings,
a spinoff. The very
yes,
first spinoff, as a matter of fact,
yes,
from Fibber McGee and
Edward
Molly.
McGee. Yes, and it was so culturally rich, and you actually feel like you're living in that day in the late '40s. It feels like you're part of that. And
Hmm.
I actually saw a reunion with the second guy who played Willard Waterman,
Willard Waterman.
and the daughter. And there's three cast members from the original back in '93. They actually went and did an entire sequence of a play of the program. You can find it on YouTube. It's just fascinating how much talent they have, how they had it still today, because that's what they did all the time. They just crank out those shows naturally in front of live audiences. And I respect that a lot more than somebody who goes over their takes 100 times. I mean, they had to go from beginning to end.
What you say was what you say. You can't. Yeah, there's no do over. You got to
Yeah.
keep going ahead, and that's the thing about live radio, and well, even what we're doing now in this informal, conversation here, it's not scripted, and what we say is what we say.
Right. So, Scott, have you ever watched The Great Gildersleeve?
I have not.
It will change your life. There's so much talent in that one show, and so many plots. And it makes you realize, wait a minute, the drugstore was used to get malts, and they made sandwiches there, and there's so many things in that show that you learn so much about the '40s. And they talk about the vehicles and the problems they have, and what was really valuable. Like some of these old shows, you realize women used to trade nylons. They used to borrow each other's nylons, which today we would say, what is wrong with those people? But that's what they did. It's just a different culture altogether. But that's the Greatest Generation came out of there,
Yeah.
and a lot of that shows. They talk about the wars and everything. So Scott, what's your favorite? What's your favorite show? Comedy? You have any that?
As far as what the older shows go,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that I have a favorite. I like to watch. When I can see pieces and snips of things like Groucho Marx.
Oh
And,
yeah.
And even some of the newer stuff. Like I watched some Laugh In,
Mhm.
which was it was a live show too.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. And I have a special place in my heart for Bob Hope because I got to meet him once. And
Oh really? Awesome.
Sweet.
yeah, he was playing golf with our then Governor James Rhodes
Okay.
on a private, very, very private course one afternoon. And a friend of mine and I were working there at the time, and we were sitting off quite a distance from him, as not to disturb them. So him and Governor Rhodes came up to the green to putt, and of course they had their entourage with them, guys that didn't say anything or wearing their suits and probably had fully automatic weapons under their coats and things like that. But we're sitting there quite a distance off, and Bob Hope comes up to take his putt, and he says to Governor Rhodes, he says, Jim, if I make this shot, I'll be famous. And just the irony of Bob Hope saying something like that, and he didn't have an audience. The man didn't have an audience at the time. He just, he couldn't help himself but say something that was just
right. He was on 24/7. That's
Yeah.
the kind of guy he was. If he would have seen you in uniform, he'd have come over and shook your hand.
Well, I wasn't even in uniform at the time.
Okay.
In fact, I wasn't in at the time. But when he and the governor finished the hole, he looked over at us, and we were quite a distance away. He could easily have ignored us and said, "Hey, you boys want to come over for a picture or something?"
Wow.
Seriously, invited us over. The governor took a picture of me and my friend and Bob Hope. with my camera, and
Oh,
and then Bob Hope took a picture of myself and my friend and the governor with my camera, which, you know, those are things that, you know, I'll cherish for my whole life. You know? What a guy.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. But
Somewhere in his estate, he's got your picture. Maybe. You never know.
right. So I don't know. I always like all the old time stuff. You know, my dad was born in 1920, and so he liked the old stuff. You know, he liked the old music. He liked, you know, so whenever anything like that was on, you know, I was exposed to it. So I have an appreciation for it. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think this old time radio, and I know I drive my wife crazy. I actually listen to it while I sleep. I have this pillow with speakers on it
Really?
that Carolyn bought me
I want to hear it
because, well, yeah, she doesn't want to hear it. She just
all
said.
night.
But I listen to that. I wake up with it. I go to sleep. Sometimes I'll hang in there. I'll listen. I wonder what's going to happen next. Because it's always about what's going to happen next, because you never know. Everything is, it's not like you think it is. It's everything's
Right.
twisted. And they twist it on purpose. Sometimes you can figure them out, but a lot of times it's like, what? What are they saying? Why did they do that? But and then you can't wait for the next show. So everything resets. That's what I love about, except for Johnny Dollar, everything resets the situations. Brand new characters, brand new people, same detective or the same other. There's a constant, unless it's like a show like Artemis Brooks or something. But they all have the same, you know, theme or whatever, the same kind of qualities. Even all the detective shows that are different, they were pretty much all the same people, just different situations. But they're all brilliant in their own way. Everybody's unique. The music, all the intros on these shows are pretty awesome because the orchestra and the professionalism, they have professional conductors writing the scores and everything. It's like the theme for, let's see, Carolyn, what's the show you watch in the daytime? The lawyer? No, the lawyer, the attorney.
Oh, Perry Mason.
Perry Mason.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The guy who wrote the music for Perry Mason, the same music for CBS Mystery Theater, CBS Radio Mystery Theater. That intro on that show is written by, and it shows up in Perry Mason in the background. As I was watching, I was like, wait a minute, I know that music. You guys listen? Do you ever listen to that, James?
Yes. Yes.
That is fascinating as well. I like the newer genre kind of thing. They bring it up to the 70s and 80s, but it's still in the same vein as all these companies. Sears, everybody had their own mystery theater programs for the public, and they're just fascinating, and they're just there's the same kind of imagination they brought from the 40s and 50s into the 70s and 80s.
Well,
Some of
and
it,
for the reason for that, a lot I think was because a lot of those people, especially with CBS Radio Mystery Theater, which was kind of like the first one of those reboots that came along. Mutual did another one. A lot of the names that were associated with those productions were the same names that were associated with the Inner Sanctum, or, you know, with suspense programs from back in radio's golden era. Hyman Brown is a good example of that. Elliot Lewis was responsible for the Mutual Broadcasting Radio Theater reboots. And so you had a lot of these people's, you know, they were veterans of that genre and of that industry, and they knew how to produce a solid product. And when you go from, I think Johnny Dollar, I think it was a Yours Truly Johnny Dollar episode that was one of the final episodes from what we call the golden age of radio back in 1962. But from that time, from the 1940s up until, you know, the end of that era, then all of a sudden there were no productions like that. It was all music, news, and sports.
right.
So by the time we come back into 1971, 1972, somewhere around in there for CBS Radio Mystery Theater, you had a brand new audience that had seen this stuff and its appetite was whetted, and that's why it had such a tremendous run. I think it was on for like 15, 20 years before it finally went off the air.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was those. There's so many of those out there. So Scott, you got to watch CBS Radio Mystery Theater. It's fantastic. It runs the gamut from everything you can imagine. You know, and
Really?
very, very well, because the masters who do the 40s and 50s stuff actually are producing those. So yeah, that's a very good thing to look at. Fascinating. Yeah, write that down. I can see you links. But yeah, I'd like just like Don Pardo shows up, in modern times in the 80s. And this guy is from back then, just like the Mutual Radio Network. Larry King was on that when he did his broadcasts in the 80s. And that's an old
the
school.
overnight broadcasts, right? He was Mutual.
Yeah. Mutual, I mean, there's all kinds of things. So for the trivia questions, I'm offering free prizes, valuable gifts. So since you answered 2 of the questions, James, correctly, we'll give you a fuel tank of gas from Signal.
Okay. All right.
And,
Signal gasoline.
Yes. And
for the Flying Red Horse.
Cream oil for your hair. That comes in handy.
I'm going to have to have that.
Scott, you get the consolation prize. What is that, Carolyn?
I don't know. Lots of Cracker Jacks.
Lux.
With a prize.
No.
Lux Flakes.
Lux Flakes. Yeah. See, that's the other thing we learned. The things that they had back then, like flakes for washing clothes or dishes instead of like powder. Mayonnaise on your salad. So I don't know if you know this, James, but my family's from the West Virginia border, and my aunt Judy, she made salad with mayonnaise. That was the topping. I don't know if you guys had that or not, but that was what they did. But just like the lettuce with the jello on top, that was around there, and that still goes on in my church. They still make that. Well, years ago. But there's a lot of old school things that you learn. The culture is pretty rich. I mean, you think it was like soda jerks and the phosphate and everything, all that stuff is a part of our history. And there's a diner in Springfield, Ohio that still sells that stuff. It's open like 3 days a week, and it's downtown. They have the soda jerk, and they have the stools and everything. I haven't been there yet, but I want to go. It's a part of history. All these things.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of day-to-day life, in a lot of those radio programs, and how things were done. I mean, once upon a time, there was an elevator captain. You didn't just get on an elevator. You had trained personnel in there to operate this. They had that big lever. It looked like the throttle command on the bridge of the ship. And ching, and you'd be off. But see, now, you don't have that now. Soda jerks, another case in point. All these, or who knows what a candy butcher is?
Yeah.
Okay. I never heard of it before, but on an episode of Dragnet, I found out that it was a guy who sold pieces of loose candy in the movie theaters.
Ah, interesting.
Okay. So he was separate from the concession stand. And he might go through like in between a feature and a short film and so, but there were candy butchers, elevator captains, soda jerks would be another good one. Newsboys. Yes. When was the last time you guys saw a newsboy? Yeah. Or a meter maid, for that matter?
That reminds me, like what's that? Copy boy. The newspaper had a copy boy when the reporter got done with the story. He had the copy boy make copies of it, or whatever their job. I'm not really sure what their job was, but they would call them copy boy.
And he would make copies of it. He would just probably send it to the editors or down to the printing department, to where it would be set up in layout. But yeah, all those jobs, all those different little things that don't exist anymore. Think about from our childhood, like drive-in movies or rotary dial telephones.
Right.
You know,
And,
or a
back then,
phone booth, an honest to God Clark Kent style, get in there,
right.
change clothes, come back out phone booth.
And that's where all the detectives went. Or like when I was a communist for the FBI,
Right.
that's where they went to make their calls. It's like they know you're going to go there, dude. Don't make the call. And they always catch them. What were you doing in there, comrade? you know. So and then the phones at home. The wife and I was watching Leave the Beaver. When the phone rang, your parents are right there because there's only one phone, and it's right next to Dad's chair, kind of thing. So there's a lot of things they didn't have back then. The privacy wasn't the same because there's only one of everything, and you ate whatever mom made, and mom always wore the outfit like she's going to a party or something, or dressed up for work downtown. Yeah, it's just a completely different culture, and the way they treated it. It was okay back then. There's no political correctness. So you walk into a detective office and detective says, he whistles and says, "Oh, how can I help you, sweet dame," or whatever they call him. I mean, that was normal. I mean, you'll see that a lot in those shows, and it's just the culture we had back then. There's nothing wrong with it. Just like Amos and Andy. So those are really good shows, and it's just what happened in the past. But they're fascinating. They're brilliant. The people back then, I believe, were smarter than we are. They can put stuff together.
I think definitely more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yes.
In terms of taste, in terms of talent, definitely. I mean, to be fair, a lot, and we think about Jack Benny, we think about Bob Hope, or we think of Eddie Cantor, or any of those comics from that time, and or Phil Harris is a good example too. Yeah, we kind of roll our eyes and we think, oh man, what cornball stuff. But it was still very inventive. It was still very creative. And even though it might have been a little on the cornball side, you still laughed.
Yeah.
So they sold it. And it was a rock solid product that anybody could get into and sit down and listen to him for 30 minutes, suspend belief, and really think that all that crap is falling out of Fibber McGee's closet. Or that Jack Benny really was that stingy.
Right.
There was a line, the guy's going to rob him, and he says, "All right, buddy, your money or your life." And there's this long silence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I said, "Your money or your life." Well, I'm thinking it over. And it's like I said, it's kind of corny, it's kind of silly, but at the same time, when you're in that moment and you hear those lines read, it's not corny, it's funny. And it was really bright, and it was really inventive, and you had a lot of creative people in a lot of different areas that brought forth all these wonderful programs that, in large measure, we owe a great debt to the Armed Forces radio services, because a lot of programs that I see in a lot of collections come from there, come from copies of recordings that they either pressed in glass that weren't destroyed, or they were pressed in paraffin. Mm-hmm. And then later somebody wisely, copied them down, probably on tape, and then to disc and then MP3. So out there on the internet, well, I sent you right before the show started, 500.
Yes, I can't wait. Mm-hmm.
Now, at that particular archive, there are a lot of different old-time radio rabbit holes that you can run down. And I've based the largest extent of my collection from that internetarchive.org. It's a terrific place. And at the same time, there's a wealth of that stuff that's lost forever.
Right.
It was done, and we'll never hear it again. And it's only through, like I said, the diligence of historians or clerics who took these broadcasts and archived them and compiled them. And like I said, a large debt of gratitude goes to the Armed Forces radio services, because mm-hmm. they had it all. When they sent it out overseas, it was on disc of some form.
Right. And that reminds me, because you were talking about the subject earlier, Groucho Marx if you ever watch What's My Line, or I can't remember what it is, but this guy is the funniest guy for like an hour show. He's making these little clips all the way through. He's just making this
You
stuff
bet your
up.
life.
He is like a genius. And he did this, I
Mm.
don't know how many years, but if you ever get a chance to watch that show or listen to that radio program, and he's talking to people he doesn't even know, and he's making fun of them or whatever in situations. The guy is a genius. I never knew because you don't see him. You just see Groucho Marx here and there, pictures of him. You know who he is just by looking at him. But the guy's mind is brilliant. It's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Absolutely.
He
Because
is,
you didn't know who those
yeah,
people were. You know, they were
right.
strangers when they
He'd
came
say,
up.
yeah, right. So what do you do in Indiana? I'm a bus driver. They did tear that apart and then keep going, and it's hilarious. So sometimes I hear that come on. I'm like, yes. So like you were saying, all the stuff's preserved, and the armed forces, yes, they have a big part to do with that for the troops. But there's a lot of radio programs. I go to TuneIn Radio, and I got like 6 or 7 stations I listen to, and they're all different. Some of them are they specify or whatever. And Scott, I'm going to send you that link
Great.
so you can listen to that. So there's just so much there, so many treasures out there, and that's what I consider them to be, our treasures of our past, and makes you think differently. And that's like I said in my post. That's what I listen to when I work on the '58 Mercedes, because it puts me back in the era kind of thing. That's like it kind of makes things real. When I do that. But I've been listening to that for years. Old time radio is just. I like talking to like my parents or my in-laws. They were alive back then. And I talk about things like yeah, and they start quoting things from like The Shadow and things like that. So that was part of life, because a lot of people didn't have TVs, or couldn't afford them, and that's what you did. You sat around the radio and you listened to the program. Everybody had a radio somewhere, and that's what's important. So I got a question. So Box 13 was a series of an adventurer. This is for you, James
Or Scott.
or Scott. Dan Holiday. Dan Holiday, you probably have heard of him, who placed an ad in the paper to get material. Adventure wanted will go anywhere, do anything. Box 13, needless to say, Adventure was always ensued. Who was the star, producer, and sometimes writer of the show?
Alan Ladd.
You got it. Alan Ladd, you got it.
Oh man, did you look that
No, it came off the top of his head. I'm telling you, man, you are a ringer.
No kidding.
You are like there. You are there.
Yeah.
You have your own
I'm
radio
in the
show.
zone when it comes to OTR. It really truly is something I love, and I've absorbed it 30 some years.
Awesome. I think I got it 2013 when I really started listening to a lot of that, 13, 14. I love it. It's great. It's awesome. It takes you to another world. You forget what you're doing, where you are, and it's kind of like an escape. And that's the reason why I started listening to those. I was on some kind of a medical thing, and then it got my attention away from my issues. Helped me out a lot. So I still listen to it today. And I actually got a portable speaker, rechargeable for the car, so I can listen to it in the Mercedes when I'm driving. If I can listen over the hum of those things are like almost like tractor sounding. So you kind of go, it's not easy, but they do have. My car doesn't have a radio, didn't come with it, but it's okay. It's all right. You would think, that's back in that time. You would think they'd have that, but no. I got the scaled down version of that Mercedes, which is still expensive at that time. But yeah, I enjoy talking to other people. Talking to other people about what's on radio is pretty awesome, because you're thinking on the same page. And so I appreciate you guys being here.
Wait a minute, I got one
Oh,
more.
we're not done yet.
No, I got one more. It's got to be for Scott.
Scott,
Number
you're up.
5.
Scott, number
I got to
5.
try to stump him. Number 5.
Okay. Joel McCrea played Jace Pearson in this based on a true story police procedural series.
Hmm.
You don't get it? Okay, all right. Okay, next, James.
That would be True Tales of the Texas Rangers.
No!
That's
oh
what
my God!
You got it's. Huh? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Jace Pearson.
Oh man.
I can't stop him.
No, I'm telling you, he's a ringer. You should do this. You should make some kind of career out of this. If you could. Some kind of, I don't know what you could do, but I know you enjoy
Okay,
it.
one more. See if James can't get that one.
Sergeant Friday's first partner died suddenly of a heart attack, as portrayed in the show Big Sorrow, aired December 27, 1951. What was his name?
Are you talking about the actor or are we talking about the character?
Character.
Okay. Well, the character's name was Ben Romero, Sergeant Ben Romero. And the actor's name was, it wasn't Ben Alexander because he played Sergeant Frank Smith, the follow-up partner. The actor's name, I can see him plain as day. It escapes me now, but his partner's name was, and he did die. The actor died of a heart attack in real life.
Right.
So, Barton Yarbrough. Barton Yarbrough was the actor's name.
You're killing me here. That's pretty awesome.
One more.
Okay, you want to stump it one more time?
I'm trying. Number 7, but you'll have to answer. You have to give him all the answers. Then he has to decide.
Okay, I never heard of this before. Okay, yeah. In the Puritan 1950s, which of the following subjects were taboo as subjects on the radio episodes of Dragnet? Was it prostitution, murder of children, or drug abuse, or none of the above?
None of the above. They covered all those different subjects.
Wow.
He gets another tank of gas.
Get another tank of gas. Which leads me to the Signal radio program. That is a piece of work right there. I love what they have. I love the music. You know, we're talking about Signal's the sponsor of, I can't remember what's the name of the program. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Of course he does.
Signal Oil.
Well, they sponsored a couple different ones. Romance of the Rancheros, maybe? It was about the history of California? No?
No, it's like I can't remember now. I'll have to get back with you later on that. What was it? It's their mystery shows where people kill each other, you know, or they, you know, let's see. The Whistler.
The Whistler.
The Whistler. That's it.
Whistler with Bill Foreman, right?
Yes.
I am the Whistler.
Yes. Versus the Whisperer.
You know, that was the thing about radio. You could sell it. And the Whisperer was a good example of that. Or there was another one. It was a takeoff of the Green Hornet, the Green Llama.
Yeah. Right.
He was a mystical kind of hero too, but yeah. So you could the magic of radio was the limits of your imagination in terms of what you could sell as a character or as entertainment or as a concept. Didn't matter.
So yeah, like The Shadow, there was a show concurrent or before that called The Avenger. Do you remember that? Because he had the same powers and they had the same. Nobody knows his identity except for his lovely companion. You know, they use a lot of sexist statements in all these shows, but I kind of like it. The lovely companion, the meek wife, and everything, and yeah. And then we're talking a little older, Bela Lugosi and all these other people, and the enemy was always had an English accent. Remember that? And the same thing happened in Columbo too. You watched that show?
Yes.
The guy,
Beautiful.
the high society guy is always the guilty one, right?
So
But I
some
think-
really polished character. Yeah, he was always some kind of upper crust type.
That's the same thing with with and there's one in Magnum PI, right? I mean, Magnum's caretaker, but I think you talk about if you go back in the 40s and 50s with those shows, the superior person is always an English guy. There's some kind of fascination with the English accent, and that's what you take. That's what you become when you play that part. And a lot of times you're the evil guy, just like Disney did that with The Lion King. I'm trying to get a little deep here. Remember?
Well,
Scar.
you're talking about with Jeremy Irons playing, the bad lion. Scar.
Yes.
Well, I think that was Jeremy Lyons. Just like it was George Sanders who gave voice to the character Kaa, not Kaa, but the tiger in the Jungle Book.
Right.
Shere Khan.
Yeah. I see this little theme.
I think it's again, it's like you said, it's always some kind of polished, smooth customer that, they're just too cool to do something like that. But then we find out that no, they're not. They're incredibly villainous. And that's in a way part of
what? You just described all the aliens on X-1. They all had an English accent. They were superior. And they're up to something. They're up to no good. They're going to try to take over the planet.
It was couched as beneficial and harmless, but no, it was always something evil in terms of taking over the planet.
That's why I never trusted Cary Grant, because of that. He was a smooth guy and everything, and I don't know.
But I often thought he made a good James Bond.
Yes, right.
The reason I say that was because of the movie North by Northwest, which was an Alfred Hitchcock picture where he's mistaken for a spy. He's not, but there are a lot of these people who mistake him for a spy, and they're all after him. And he has, they're trying to kill him and chase him down. He has no idea what's going on, and he's on the fly trying to figure this whole thing out. But it was made just a couple of years before the first James Bond picture was, and I remember watching it and thinking, he would have done well.
I agree, but some people don't translate to TV like The Saint. I don't know. He just doesn't look right. The Englishman, I can't remember his name now. No, the one before that, on the radio version. Vincent Price. Vincent Price
on radio, and then for a brief time, Tom Conway, who was George Sanders' brother.
Ah, wow. How do you know this stuff? It's kind of scaring me now. How come you don't have an English accent? You should try that. You got that West Virginia accent down, though.
That's a solid one. Yeah, I can't escape. I try, but
no, it's fine. No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. My parents talk like that. Everything was up the hill. And
over yonder
down by the creek. Yeah.
Over the hill there.
Hardworking, good people on the river. So my wife actually, she was raised there along the border too, Steubenville area.
Right.
So, it's just, and actually, if you drive through there, it takes you back to that era, kind of. The buildings. It is amazing. So it's just like Route 40. Like you see this my background here. This is.
I like that.
Yeah, this is off Route 66, which all of us have probably been down through there. That's what Route 40 looks like in Ohio for the longest time. They had the old motels and everything. So there's a lot. And 40 goes from Baltimore to San Francisco.
Yep.
So more than Route 66, there's a lot of them out there. And some of this nostalgia we're talking about, this is where it happened. That's how they got across country. Like, I don't know his name. Anyway, when you went cross country, that's what you took, Route 40 and different places. And then you had branches from everywhere else. Then Route 66 showed up. And people drove their cars for days, stayed at little motels. Just a different way of life. And I appreciate that. I can appreciate, some of the things they did. And it makes you, because your car, you gotta put water in your battery. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Exactly. Sealed batteries weren't. Yeah, they didn't have no such thing.
Yeah.
I can remember in 1969, we left home. We left my home in Beckley, West Virginia, shortly after Apollo 11 lifted off. And our destination was Florida because one of my dad's childhood buddies worked at Cape Kennedy. And, in the 60s, Cape Kennedy was the place to be.
Right.
Technology, science, the space race. And it took us as many days to get to Florida because the interstate system hadn't been completed yet. So there were a lot of state routes down through South Carolina and Georgia and on into Florida that we took. It took us as long to get to Florida as it took the Apollo 11 crew to get to the moon. It was 3 days, and we did it in style. We did it in a 1969 Pontiac Ventura, and we had a Coleman camper on the back of it, a tent camper called a Nimrod. And me and my brother used to say we had a Nimrod driving the car and a Nimrod being pulled. I was talking about our dad.
No,
we did it
no,
in
not
3
true.
days. You can do Florida now in 12 hours.
Yeah.
But in 1969, from where I live, you can do it in 12 hours, depending on where you're going. But in 1969, forget about it.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
we would find a KOA campground to stay in for the night.
Yeah.
And so it took us 3 days to get down there. And I remember we had that camper set up in the back of my Dutch Uncle Larry's yard, and Bernie, my brother, and I watched. It was late at night. I remember that. We watched Neil Armstrong and those guys walk on the moon on a black and white TV that had a extension cord that ran from the screened-in porch out to the camper. And that was, man, I mean, it took us 3 days to get to Florida just so we could get there in time to watch these guys walk on the moon.
Wow.
And
see, back then, and I, because my dad, we in the military went different places. We lived in North Carolina. We would go down through the Blue Ridge Mountains. There is no rails, and this for what you experienced as well. And you could look over the rails and see these old cars down there at the bottom that had got over the edge. But they didn't care about your life back then. They would not have had you wear a mask today either. You die.
These risks are best managed individually.
Yes.
Those guys thought they could make it. They were wrong.
It wasn't. People weren't so selfish back then. If they died, they died. I mean, it's just they took the risk. But I remember my mother told me that one time my brother, sister, and I were in a car near this plateau up the side because all it was just an outcropping of the rock. There was no official place to stop. But anyway, we were in the back of the car. My dad parked it, and the car started creeping over the edge. So my dad had to run to the car, jump in the front, and slam on the brakes.
Oh, boy. So
that was a close call. I didn't even know anything about till years and years later. But I mean, that's the way life was. Take risks. You go just like this coronavirus here. We should be allowed to take our own risks. If you have your mask, then why am I wearing mine, kind of thing? And it's so minuscule. So it's just one of those things where things were completely different back then. If you caught typhoid, you caught it. I mean,
best of luck to you.
We do. Yeah.
If you live, you'll never have to worry about it again.
Right. Exactly.
Your troubles are over as far as typhoid goes. You're good. And I think a lot of this, there's a school of thought, and I'm not going to take any credit away from them, and I'm not going to marginalize them that has seen this coronavirus, regardless of its origin, and there's some things about that as well. But I think they've seen it as an opportunity to expand authority beyond, the currently legitimately recognized restraints that it should have. A lot of
people believe in that. Uh-huh.
And I do kind of have a pride. Now obviously, I have a mom who is 86 years old. I don't want to see anything happen to her. I'm always careful when I'm around her. Same thing with my brother. But I was careful around her during the regular flu season.
Right.
I was careful around her during the H1N1 too.
So you're trying to say you know how to act. You know how to be responsible.
In certain applications, I would go along with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe not
yeah.
every reason, but yeah. And I think a lot of people do. I think if we would have spent the resources where they really needed to be expended in caring for the elderly, in caring for those people that may have some comorbidities, in caring for the folks that are most at risk, while the rest of us go about it, take the hit and move on.
Yeah, just like the rifleman. People who brave the West. You ever watch The Rifleman, Scott?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Chuck
man.
Connors, yeah,
Yes.
man.
So watch Chuck Connors, man.
I think it's the right.
Twirling that.
Rifleman actually had a show about
Bring that
like
gun
the
around.
coronavirus kind of thing. I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if you saw the episode. They had a show about this pandemic, and I don't.
They didn't call it that.
They didn't.
It was just like they had to outcast and isolate themselves.
They isolated themselves, but they didn't wear any masks, though.
No, but they didn't call it pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did hear. I thought we heard another radio show that had the same theme in it, because the 1918 pandemic made it open everybody's eyes. So, but they didn't know what they were dealing with at the time. Just like the plague, everybody got infected, and this isn't what this is. So this is nowhere close to that. So, but anyway, yes, yeah. Speaking of, there was a discussion about shows that were on the TV before they got on the radio. That's pretty interesting. I don't know if anybody knows any of those.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
only two that I know. I don't know if you know of any.
Well, Dragnet
James?
would have been one that was on radio. Gunsmoke would have been another. The Jack Benny program had an incarnation on television, which ran almost as long as his radio program.
Right.
Gildersleeve.
That's right.
Briefly, Our Miss Brooks translated really well. And speaking of Our Miss Brooks, he was a character. He was a great actor in radio. He was prolific, like a lot of those guys. Gail Gordon.
Yes.
He played
right.
trivia on Mr. Mooney from the Lucy show.
Yes.
Back in the day, he was Mayor LaTrivia and a number of voices on Fibber McGee's show, and then he was on Gildersleeve. He was also Osgood Conklin on Our Miss Brooks, the master of the slow burn. I don't think there was anybody better at getting to that point and then just blowing up. He could do the slow burn better than anybody. And then when it came time for him to just explode, he was great.
Just remember, the guy I hear the most is Parley Bear. He played like every other part on every other radio show.
He did a lot of CBS stuff. Yeah. He was around for a long time. He was in Gunsmoke. He also did a lot of True Tales of the Texas Rangers as the sheriff who would need assistance from Ranger Jace Pearson.
And very good, tying that together. You brought that full circle like a pro, like a champ. And you'll listen to a show and it will say Parley Bear. It's like, Parley Bear was in that too? What?
He was
that guy he must have been working full time, doing that. He must have gone from studio to studio because he's in like almost everything.
Well, Parley Bear, William Conrad.
Yes, William Conrad. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
For CBS. John Daner.
Yes.
Parley Bear would have been another one there. Elliot Lewis for NBC. He was in a lot of programs and went on to produce and direct a number of radio shows as well. And all those guys, when the time came, they went to TV.
Right.
So
it's like William Conrad.
That translation easy.
We know William Conrad as what's his name? The big fat guy, Cannon. Yeah.
Cannon.
That's how we know him.
Huh?
But he was much more than that. He was phenomenal. He was a staple in radio. Very well respected man, and now I look at him completely differently than just Cannon. That's just something he did later. So these guys are in their prime doing these great things, and they show up later. But their influence carries on. It's like Columbo, the same mold as everybody else. And I listened to a show the other day. Some guy actually was best friends with Columbo. And he was a what do you call it? they call him the Harlem Hoodlum. He's old school wrestler and everything.
Okay.
So this guy was a champion karate guy and everything, and he's I think he's like 80 now. But he and Columbo he wanted to some kind of screening or something. He had an agent, and he was doing this part. He's supposed to walk down through this scene, and then Columbo would come out. So he screwed it all up. He said, "Hey, you're Peter Falk." Oh my God. So, all right. So that's how they became best friends. And he became friends with Elvis and all these other people. His whole life went from poverty in Harlem to like this movie star. So, and he was in all those eras and everything, and all those, he was part of that. So it's interesting to see. And the people that are still around are treasures. Like I have, one of my friends is like Tony Dow, and another one is the guy who played Beaver. Who was that, Carolyn?
Jerry Mathers.
Jerry Mathers. I knew you.
Well, don't ask me, ask James.
Ask James.
Hey, I knew that one.
And I wanted to get somebody.
All right, Scott, way to go.
I wanted to get somebody from the Aldrich family, the youngest people there, whoever's still alive. I wanted to put together something like in the future, have all these people lined up, and with our good friend Gary. Gary has some Hollywood ties. He sent me a picture of Opie and his first girlfriend. I can't remember her name. Anyway, she shows on this program. She worked, in Dallas,
Morgan
and
Brittany.
That's it, Morgan Brittany.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could probably get her on.
He's tight with the Hollywood types, man.
Yes.
They flock to him. Everybody flocks.
Yes.
His show's taken off.
Yeah. Gary's a very unique guy. He's done a lot, but it's things like that. I mean, it's endless possibilities. I would love to have, Tony Dow and all these people, and people bringing people on to a big program like this, with you being the expert, of course. But, I don't know if I was on a program with her or not. I don't remember. I might have been. Sometimes he has like a lot of people at the same time on his program.
Yeah, he has heavy hitters. Well, and as a matter of fact, he's got another barn burner coming up this Monday with us. He's got some terrific people that are going to be on that show, all female roundtable.
Okay.
So that ought to be pretty hot.
I try to listen to him every week. I try to listen to your program, and John DeLemme. Hi, John. Shout out.
Hey, John, the machine gun, Tommy gun.
Yeah. Wow. So we are done with an hour of OTR. Unless you guys have anything else to say, if you guys got anything to wow us with, James or Scott.
No, I've had a terrific time this evening, Kevin, Scott. You guys being here with you guys, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I did the show because we had gotten this little conversation on Facebook, putting out detective names and everything. I'm like, man, this guy is deep. Well, so yeah, I was gonna bring up maybe another time we can do like the detectives that railed against the police detectives that went against like Markham and all these other guys, and how and I just want to say this real quick. That's the way it was. You'll see this. Police assume you're guilty back then when you weren't.
Yeah.
By just simple deduction, and then you find yourself in jail or getting beat up, and they beat you up when you get to prison. That happened a lot. Yeah. So that happened. Actually, I remember in the 60s, my dad would say stuff like that. They'll take you in and beat you up. And, that happened some places because the rights weren't there because they were in charge. So yeah, there's a lot of conflict. And so there's a lot of quick to the draw. And that's what made the detectives even more better than the police, because they actually thought things through. Just a little side note there. And I'm sure you agree with me there.
Absolutely. This has been
Scott,
a great time. I've had a terrific time tonight. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate you coming on. I do. Scott, what's your final thoughts on this?
Well, on that thread you were speaking about on your Facebook, you were talking about the detectives and everything, and I said something more as a joke, than anything.
really?
I just wondered if you got that at all. And
I
we're
did, but I don't remember what it is.
what I said was in response to you asking about, old time radio detectives and everything. The only thing that could come to my mind was Nick Danger, Third Eye.
Ah,
Does that ring any bells at all?
no, it doesn't.
Well,
Does it to
what
you?
it is it's. Have you ever heard of Fire Sign Theater? It's a comedy troupe.
Well, you know
Very
more than I do.
in the 60s and 70s. Nick Danger is one of their characters that they've made up, and they do an entire album, two sides of an album that's it's comedy, and it's really weird comedy, but it's in the vein of old time radio.
Ah,
So,
I have to check that out.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Maybe.
you got to be in a.
You're gonna be in a vegetative state or pie or something.
I'm sorry, what?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Let's see, Carol, I have a problem here. I've had somebody named Heather Brown has been in the waiting room in the green. I don't know who this is.
I don't either.
You guys see that?
I saw it
Yeah,
came up. She tried to come in, and then you didn't let her in or something.
So anyway,
I don't know who it is.
I don't either. I didn't invite them.
She's a friend of mine. She's a coworker of mine, and and she knew I was going to be on the show tonight, so she was.
So should I add her on?
Yeah, bring her in. Let's bring her in. Hey, Brownie. Maybe, I don't know. She might be bashful. She might not.
She's
might not wanna come.
muted. She's muted right now. So
Okay, she was just listening in though.
okay, that's cool. That's cool. Hi, Heather Brown. If you know James, you're a friend of mine. So, all right, thank you, Scott, so much.
Nice to meet you, Scott. Enjoyed this.
I
Tremendous.
appreciate.
Nice to meet you, James. That was actually a very enlightening encounter. Thank you.
That's awesome. I'll send you some links, but Scott, James is very patriotic. He and John Delemy and Gary, they're behind us. He did a show on Pearl Harbor last week. It was fantastic listening to the testimonies. So, hey, James, you can plug your show if you like.
Okay. It's called A Conservative's Perspective. We do it live Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Blog Talk Radio at the Patriot Nation Radio Network. We also have a recorded version of the show that goes out Sundays, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Mojo 50 Radio. And you go to mojo50.com and you can find it there, and you can listen live or you can listen in its archive format. And once again, Kevin, thank you so much. This was a swell time.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. You guys have a good evening, and we're going to sign off here. And I appreciate you coming, and I had a wonderful time. Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
Too. All right, that's the end of the show. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Let's see. Let's talk. We'll not be around next week, but we're taking the rest of the month off for the holidays. We'll be back. And remember, this is Reality Fox from Dayton White House saying, if you have a story to tell, I have time to listen. So let's talk.